Welcome to Walk in the Way. This is Renovation of the Heart Book Club. We're in Chapter 4 on Question 6, which is, why is giving so central to the restoration of the soul? How does giving depend upon the reality of the kingdom? I'll go ahead and start with my quote. It is the love of God, admiration and confidence in his greatness and goodness, and the regular experience of his care that free us from the burden of looking out for ourselves. The word frees us, that phrase really stood out to me in that quote. And it reminds me of Galatians 5:1, which is, for freedom Christ has set us free. And it's odd to contrast sort of the biblical conception of freedom in that sense from the sort of American dream type idea of being able to do whatever you want whenever you want it. And they're not quite opposed, but the biblical idea is bigger, if that makes sense. It contains the idea of goodness within it, that we are free not only to do whatever we want, but free to do what we know is good and to delight in being able to do that rather than simply to be mastered by our own impulses and appetites. Whereas it's the kind of the common understanding of freedom in the Western individualistic, capitalistic system that we find ourselves in. And that ties into the idea of giving, because even though there's this idea of doing for ourselves that's sort of wrapped up in the American ethos, and that sort of predates Rand, she probably most perfectly distills the American ideology in terms of that with her philosophy of objectivism, which essentially at its root is the idea that humanity is best served by concentrating resources in the most capable hands. And so the corollary to that is that giving, charity, altruism of any kind is a moral negative. It is a harm to society to give freely, to sacrifice for those who are less capable and less able, less talented. And on a system that is, and it's why it's called objectivism, on a system that is based upon the reality of the material universe as we understand it, that actually makes sense. But a system based on the knowledge and dependence on a God of infinite blessing and goodness, that system kind of falls apart and is only in the knowledge of a system that is outside of the rules of physical reality that we can actually give, because we know that our needs will always be met because there will always be provision for those needs.
I think for my kind of spiritual formation, I read through a lot of Rand's stuff during COVID, and her approach to objectivity was very helpful for me, especially when unpacking spiritual matters. And I think with that, there was a lot, I want to say contradicts, because I think that's kind of what you're getting at here, is that things are contradicting a little bit between Rand and maybe Christianity.
Yeah, and the reality of the kingdom and infinite provision in a God that is boundless.
Right. And so perhaps maybe in Rand's model, would she say that somebody giving their money resources to the church, where the person of Christ is the most capable and most person who knows how to reallocate those resources to where?
Yeah, I think
maybe just to pose that hypothetical out there.
Yeah, if she
Sure.
were not an atheist, which she was, she would agree with that.
Oh yeah,
because
I'm sure she'd disagree 100% with me.
Yeah.
In saying that, but
yes.
Right, sure.
Christ being all-knowing, all good, all loving, all wise,
and maybe
is the most capable person to allocate resources to get the maximum benefit from them. And so if she had accepted the premise of Christ's deity, which she didn't, but if that was a thing that she was capable of accepting, I think that would be a way to sanctify her philosophical system.
So if I'm understanding correctly, I'm not familiar with Rand like y'all, so if I'm understanding correctly, the systematic view of giving that she had was essentially that giving and self-sacrifice is bad because it promotes weakness.
Well, it destroys value.
Okay.
Yeah, because you're allocating resources to someone who can't, or presumably won't, be able to grow them. They're just going to consume. And so the consumption of value is a negative on the Randian objective system.
Gotcha. So in contrast to that, within the chapter, Willard offers a alternative humanistic perspective. He quotes Eric Fromm, who essentially puts forward the idea that there's the correct idea that there's more to giving than simply self-sacrifice.
Right.
And he goes on to describe it as the highest expression of potency, essentially just because it's an extension of yourself for the good of others. However, there's a risk with that from a purely humanistic perspective
Right.
of a congratulatory, I'm the one doing all this great stuff.
Yeah. Self-sufficiency.
Self-sufficiency. I was thinking self-something.
Yeah.
In answer to question 2, Willard goes on to say that essentially the only proper way in which we can give with the correct orientation that is others-focused rather than self-centered is if we understand that it's not purely self-sacrifice, it's a positive good for ourselves, but it's not solely of ourselves.
Right.
And we don't deserve any of the glory or the credit for it. And so it's done on behalf of God. And then he sort of closes the chapter, page 67. This is under Pulling the Whole Self Together. Experience-based confidence in God's loving care allows all 6 dimensions of the human self to progressively come into harmony with each other and enables us to be generous in every respect to those around us. Only love of God frames and supports love of neighbor, giving it right direction and the power to carry out its aim of goodness within the kingdom. So primary answer to this question is basically just it's central to the restoration of the soul because it allows an experience-based confidence of God's love.
Yeah.
And it depends on the kingdom because that loving kindness in alignment with God's will is only possible in relationship with Him. And alternatively, it becomes a sort of self-adulation sort of thing.
Yeah.
Right. And earlier in the chapter, we're talking about how pride is the main
Granddaddy sin.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And how this giving that we're talking about, giving in general, like
It's a direct attack against that feature of self-sufficiency,
right,
which
And-
is
and the-
pride in action.
Exactly. And that's what heals the soul.
Yeah. And circling back to our discussion of like Randian objectivism and value and bringing in some Austrian economics to go with it. Because like if our central thesis for goodness is value creation, that begs the question of what is valuable and how can that be determined? And the Austrian answer to that question, their praxeological approach, is that the value of a thing is determined by the price that someone is willing to pay for it. And that circles back to the cross and Christ's sacrifice. So the price that he is willing to pay for a human soul is himself. And that is an infinite value proposition. So the proper allocation of resources, even on the Randian objective system, is to benefit the eternity of a human soul. Contra to her idea that self-sacrifice and altruism and giving are a net negative because they destroy value. It's actually the most positive, the highest good possible for a person to give of their earthly resources for the benefit of another because it heals their soul, which is infinitely more valuable than anything they could possess.
Yeah, I think that's what was so potent about her work, particularly for me, was that she has the right objective approach to reality.
It was just missing Christ.
Exactly. It was missing the church and all that really that she's able to do with objective reality. Like,
just
that
mere
that
physical
interacts
reality.
With,
Yeah.
Exactly. Interacts with broken people, broken souls, that and heals them, restores them completely in these acts of giving. And we're going to get into more later, but giving is it's really so central to the soul because it's how we are made in the image of God Himself.
Yeah, the act of creation is an essentially giving act.
Right.
Going back to topics of incarnation, is when God creates reality, especially creates us as being in His image. He gives of His Spirit to us, which is the highest form of giving possible, which is incarnation. He incarnates His character and His name in a formerly non-existent reality so that we can participate in his glory with him. So I guess to wrap it up, to bring it full circle, how can we give of ourselves in a way that is to participate in Christ's incarnational work in reality? How can we make more of him, both in the sense of making his name great by giving him the glory that he's due, but also how can we incarnate his character in ourselves and in the lives of those around us? So obviously very curious to see what your thoughts are on that. And we're super grateful that you have chosen to join us for this. So leave a comment on your thoughts on the video, how this idea of giving and its centrality to the restoration of souls has gone. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave them in a comment below. And we hope to see you next time.
Thank you for watching today's episode of Walk in the Way Book Club. Please like, comment, and share this video. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content. We can't wait to see you in the next one. God bless.